Thanks for tuning in. In this video, I'm going to talk about something important to everyone that's living right now as we speak and is to be born sometime in the future. Very important topic, and it's about the greatest health conspiracy. What is the number one most profitable industry? It's the pharmaceuticals, and that's a health care based industry, but it's more like a sick care based industry, because if everybody was healthy, this multi-billion gazillion trillion dollar industry, it wouldn't survive. If everybody was healthy, nobody would need their drugs, nobody would need their fake treatments, people would be healthy and they would just enjoy life. Like for example in Hawaii, when the Europeans first came, Hawaiians lived pretty healthy compared to what the world is like today. They lived off the land, they lived simply, they lived in harmony with nature. They ate 100% organic food, even though obviously it wasn't certified back then, but just because they didn't use any kind of chemicals or weird processing techniques to make their food, they kept it simple and they respected the land. But today it's the opposite. So we're going to start with birth. So as soon as a child is born into this world, nowadays they go through, even before birth, the pregnant mother already starts all these vaccines, flu vaccines from the doctors pushing the pregnant woman, even though the flu vaccine is quite dangerous due to the ingredients they put in your blood and body. So the annihilation already starts even before the woman gets pregnant, if she was on some kind of steroids, birth control, all of these, or if she had like some kind of chemical exposures when she was younger. So all these things affect the future generation. So annihilation starts even before birth. But when the child is born, if they're lucky to be born healthy in the hospital, that's great. But here's a statistic that recently came out. Among developed nations, like first world nations like United States, Japan, England, Korea, Russia, China, developed nations, United States came first place in terms of infant mortality rates, high infant mortality rates. It had the highest infant deaths is the United States. Crazy, right? Because people in the United States spend the most on healthcare out of all nations. Out of all developed nations, United States spends more than any other country, developed country, on healthcare. Yet, United States has the highest infant mortality rates. Doesn't make sense, right? If you're spending so much money on something good, it should be creating a better health and lowering the infant mortality, right? The annihilation starts even before birth. The depopulation program with all these chemicals and this and that, I'm going to go over that. But when the child is born in the hospital, they get already annihilated with injections. For example, the injection of certain vaccines, vitamin K shot, the supposed, so they think they get the vitamin, but they put a little poison in that vitamin K shot. Check the ingredients if you're going to consider. You can opt out of it. It's not mandatory. And of course, I'm not a doctor or medical professional, but I'm just speaking from experience. And this is just my opinion. So they get the vaccinations already at birth. They get the vitamin K shot. They get some kind of weird eye drops to prevent some kind of sexually transmitted disease. They get all these chemicals, put in their system, but the system is so small, so it's very sensitive. And I'm talking about a healthy child that is born in the regular hospital, at least in the United States. That's how they do it. Annihilation continues with air. Air, so we're talking about chemtrails, uh, putting out weird chemicals in the atmosphere, and then eventually you can't really see it because it's so small, but it comes down and people breathe that in. It could be a mixture of virus. I've heard even experts say that it's genetically modified strains. Talk about Morgellons disease is huge. That's some crazy stuff. Morgellons disease. If you don't know what that is, please do look it up. It's basically people getting these fibers growing out of them that like glow, and they're tiny, right? And like little hairs, and they get pain, and they even like emit lights under microscope. So Morgellons disease, pretty crazy. Let's not forget air, Operation Sea Spray, and similar things when the government just decides to carry out a biological experiment on a portion of population like they have done after World War II and during other times. And I think Operation Sea Spray over San Francisco Bay Area is a classic example of that kind of madness. And on top of all that, you can add pollution from the industry, from the factories, from the nuclear plants, nuclear fallout from Fukushima, for example, over the Pacific Ocean, hitting the west coast of the United States, Alaska, Oregon, California, Washington, contaminating wildlife, contaminating the food supply. Talk about pollution from coal burning plants like mercury going in the atmosphere and then going into the ocean and then going into the fish like tuna and then going into people. And no wonder people have high mercury toxicity. I was one of those people until I found out how toxic I was and did a chelation therapy protocol to get rid of mercury, lead, and other heavy toxic metals that were inside of my body. Um, on top of that, air pollution, you know, you're talking about microfibers coming from synthetic clothes, for example, little stuff like this, people don't really think about it, realize it, but anything that's made from synthetic materials like polypropylene or um, polyester and stuff like that. All of those are basically plastic fibers made from the petroleum industry. So they're synthetic fibers, they're not grown from plants. They're basically, you're wearing plastic, and research shows that these fibers from clothing, they shed and they become part of the dust that people inhale in their houses. And that's why it's commonly acknowledged that indoor pollution is often more worse than outdoor pollution. So think about that. There was also an instance of a government biological experiment that was carried out on low income neighborhoods, low income housing, when the military installed special technology that was basically spraying this radioactive spray around these low income housing, and to see how the people living there would react to these radioactive particles in the air that they were breathing. And that's crazy, and you can research that. That all got uncovered. So check it out. And it was even in the news. Next thing, water. Water. Talk about fluoride. That's huge. You know, if your water is fluoridated or you don't know and you're drinking tap water, even if you're filtering it, you got to have a special filter for the fluoride. And that's a brain poison. That's a third eye chakra poison, known as the third eye, known as the pineal gland. It calcifies your pineal gland. People can get cancer from fluoride. It gets deposited in their bones, and you know they can get like chronic inflammation from that. You can get fluorosis because it starts making these bumps in your teeth. That's having too much fluoride. And the dentists, they love to push it. The doctors love to push it. Even on the newborns, they give them fluoride drops supposedly to help the teeth grow. But that's a bunch of baloney, because when you're giving fluoride in the water, even bottled water I've seen with fluoride added for infants. It is well known that sodium fluoride is a rat poison. Doctors pushing fluoride drops to children, better watch out for that, because the body of a newborn or baby or child is a lot more sensitive to these poisons that they push. So fluoride, huge. Make sure you don't do that. We've been using fluoride-free toothpaste for like decades, because we know about this. Even in toothpaste, fluoride, fluoride, fluoride. It's a smaller amount, obviously, but you always end up swallowing a small amount of it, and over time it accumulates. Plus, they put other kind of weird chemicals in mainstream toothpaste, so we switch to like natural toothpaste. Favorite one right now is Now brand. Really good. It's fluoride free, and they use really good ingredients in it, natural and all that. So talk about water, fluoride. Next thing. Oh, by the way, pharmaceuticals, they put fluoride in that, so there you go. You know, fluoride, it's been used in concentration camps, in the Gulag, Soviet Union concentration camps. After the war, World War II, it's been used by Nazi Germans because it makes people docile. It makes them obedient. It makes them stop critical thinking. It makes them just not care, I suppose, and just kind of obey orders. So no wonder, I don't know how other military bases do it, but in Hawaii, all military bases water are fluoridated. So if you're drinking that, think about it. Chlorine, all water, all public water is chlorinated because chlorine, you know, a lot of people don't realize, but chlorine is mustard gas used as a chemical weapon in World War One, and actually, right now in Syria, 2018, as I speak, they're blaming this, the Assad government on a chlorine chemical attack. But of course, that's a false flag attack, so they can invade Syria, just like they did with Iraq and Afghanistan and all these other Middle East countries. So chlorine is actually in everybody's water that's public water because it's a disinfectant. They don't want bacteria to grow, so they add water. It's even like that in Russia. Everybody adds chlorine in the water, and that's another reason why you don't want to drink unfiltered tap water, because chlorine, what it does, it burns. You know, Clorox? Clorox is chlorine. It's a cleaning product, it's a bleach. But if you inhale it, you know how it makes it burn? That's why it was a chemical weapon in World War One. And it's banned, and obviously it's made for, like I mentioned, the public water um, treatment. So what it does, it creates inflammation. It can wipe out your gut flora. So I wouldn't inhale, I wouldn't take chlorine, and I would try not to touch it. Next one, copper and lead in pipes. We're talking about water, copper and lead. Copper overload, too much. Copper is essential mineral. It's a metal. It's essential mineral, but you need it in trace amounts. And a lot of people have copper overload. Most people probably have copper overload because most people drink water that comes through copper pipes. So that as the water passes through the copper pipes, it accumulates copper, and then people drink it, and then it deposits it in the body. So copper and zinc, they're kind of like a seesaw. If you have too much zinc, it's going to block out your copper. If you have too much copper, it may interfere with zinc, but you don't want to have too much copper, because too much copper leads to schizophrenia, mental disorders, bipolar disorders, and other kind of disorders. Lead, lead is no longer lead pipes, but maybe the soldering is lead, but everybody knows lead pipes goes in the water, and then even the lead, the kids that got poisoned in the mainland United States. We talk about Flint, Michigan. That was huge. People went to jail for that. The government officials went to jail because they knew about the lead being in the water in such high amounts, but still didn't do anything about it, from what I understand. And lead it's a heavy metal. It's a toxic heavy metal. The first thing, what it's known for is affecting mental abilities. It can give you, like retardation. So it basically disables your mind. It does get deposited in your bones as well. I didn't know that until I did a heavy metal cleanse, and I highly recommend to anyone, but of course check with your doctor. Lead-based paint obviously comes to mind with that. Very hard to get it out, because once it's in your bone, you have to think about it. Like, you have to take a chelating agent like DMSA, which is what I took, and to remove it, and it has to be like over and over, because it in a lot of cases, this heavy metal accumulation, like mercury or lead or arsenic and so forth, it's over years, it's over lifetimes, maybe decades for a lot of people, and you can't get rid of it so fast. It took decades to accumulate. It's going to take you some time to get rid of it, but I did that. It took me about 6 months, and it's still not 100% gone. So think about that. And then we talk about water pollution, so chemicals from the pesticides going in the groundwater, or somehow going in the public drinking water. Pesticides and weird bad chemicals, it depends where you live. Every location, water quality varies significantly based on what's around them, based on the filtration systems and stuff like that. So water, we talk about food now. So food is another way how they... Hey you guys, I want to talk about food, but when I almost finished making that important video regarding the food, health, and depopulation agenda, dropping some truth bombs. Of course, my computer froze. It was connected to the internet at the time, and it froze and I couldn't save it, so I have to redo it. So stay tuned for part 2 of the greatest health conspiracy, and I catch you in the next episode.